Welcome to the Angels, Magic and Joy podcast. This podcast is for those who seek answers from above, guidance and magical inspiration.
Immerse yourself in the realms of magic, angels, fairies, unicorns, dragons, and so much more. I'm Kirsty Jandrell, and I'm delighted to be here with you today.
And I am Rajba. Hello, welcome back to another episode of the Angels, Magic and Joy podcast. Today with my beloved Kirsty, just us, yes. Hello, Kirsty.
Hello.
So happy as we're going to continue today our topic, our theme of the divine feminine and how to reconnect, how to dive in to the divine feminine, how to feel it more, and touching some, interesting nuggets about it. So it's the part 2. And if you guys haven't seen part 1, it's going to be in the show notes. There's more into it. But to start, Kirsty, we've touched before already a bit about the intuition. I think it's the big one. I think it's great to start with because it's like the main, it's like the foundation, right? So what do you think, what role does intuition play in harnessing the female energy, and how can we learn to trust it more or tap into it more?
Hi, Kate. Oh, hi, everybody. Welcome back to part 2. That's such a beautiful question, and I feel like we could probably talk for hours on this, and I guess it's important to look at what intuition means, what it means to me anyway. I can give you my version, and I'm sure everybody's got their own take on it. So to me, intuition is very linked with using your third eye chakra and that sixth sense, your sixth chakra, that knowing, that feeling, that instinctual understanding of something without it having been told to you explicitly, or you haven't witnessed it directly. So it's just that inner knowing. It's that, I know this is a cliche, but it's that old feeling of, oh, Kate's going to call, and Kate calls in 5 minutes. It's that absolute tuning into the energies surrounding events, happenings, feelings, that you have no other understanding of apart from that inner knowing, that gnosis, if you like. So yeah, so I think that's how I would sort of choose to describe intuition, and yeah, our sixth chakra, Ajni chakra is responsible when that's open for allowing us that vision, that's that third eye vision, to receive that information. And I think very recently, on our ascension path, that chakra has been opened, and it's something that, if we look back historically at women who were perhaps seen as herbalists, witches, wise women, a lot of them would have had that open third eye, and because of many reasons, we've shut that down. We've learned to shut that down as humanity and society. And it's now that we're on the precipice of this evolutionary consciousness that we're moving through now, that these are, the chakra is opening again, and we're actually learning to trust it. So for me, I think trusting that intuition allows you then to trust yourself to be in flow. And when I mean in flow, that's in receipt of being in flow with the natural energies, not trying to force, control and move down a linear path, but working in with that sort of spiraling cyclical nature that is all around us. And when we're able to trust that intuition, that's when we're able to move into those feminine qualities of surrender, allowing, nurturing, caring, being rather than doing. I think in a nutshell, although that wasn't really in a nutshell, that's the start of it for me, and then everything else sort of flows from there. So it's almost that connection with the third eye and the womb center, the sacral chakra, you know, those two chakras being linked, so that sort of that womb space, that creative void, is open to receive all those creative inspirations from the third eye. What about you, Kate? What would you add? What would you add
I
to
would
that?
mention that it's also a really big source of power, not power in a way, you know, like masculine power, but the source of power, how to navigate from a different place, rather than being in a headspace, rather than, you know, it helps you, it gives you the access to a different. And it's interesting because you're mentioning third eye. For me, as I would feel it or see it, for me intuition is the crown and higher chakras, and then we read it through, which is all connected, and then kind of anchoring it in the womb space. So it comes from, you know, the universal, and then this marriage, this connection between the, you know, divine feminine, the earthy energy, and the divine masculine, you know, it's kind of this connection. And then the third eye helps us to read it, so we can get messages, we can connect, but it might not be clear, and we can very easily also be misguided in that. Once you mention the third eye, it makes me think that, you know, it's a very thin veil, it's a very thin line in between what is the intuition, and it's very often that thing is coming back, isn't it? Is it my intuition or is it my imagination? And if you would look at it from the energetic perspective, I would say, is it my, because you can read it in any way you like, depending of tradition you're you know, you associate yourself with. But so you can tell, you know, ego or heart, or you could tell angelic, beautiful, higher self energies, or the demonic weird stuff, right? So for me, it's that thin veil helps you to know, and the more you kind of you're using it. And it's a very interesting thing, what I do personally to kind of open up the intuition as well. It's like one of my practices, what I absolutely love and I always encourage people to do is, you probably do that as well, Kirsty, is, you know, kind of opening the new neural pathways in the brain. So if always something is in a certain way, how can we see more? How can we notice more? So what I love to do is physically almost creating those the outside environment. So it helps me. So it provokes my brain to be kind of extra active, so then you're ready to receive more. So very practical, you know, I love practicality in that at the same time. So let's say, you know, you always drive back home certain, you know, you take always the same road, or you always do something. So very lovely practice is to do something different, and then your nerves, your, you know, your brain, your, you know, neural patterns are like, oh, something new. So that kind of opens you up, oh, there might be something new. And the more we kind of open ourselves up to new experiences, then we can notice new, we can notice something out of the pattern, that there's something, you know. I really love that practice, and it can be very simple, you know, if you always have the same breakfast or always, you know, do something in a certain way to change that, and then your whole system is like, you know, kind of pattern interrupt, right? So there's a pattern interrupt, and you kind of, because of that, you know, it's like a practice you can do, you can open yourself to see more, to feel more, to acknowledge more, right? Do you do the same thing, Kirsty? I bet you do.
Yeah, I do, and but I don't think I do it as consciously as you do, actually. So thank you. So I'm going to take that and make it
It's
conscious.
amazing. It really, really works. It's like, because, you know, you're creating new neural pathways. So it's like your brain, it's like your whole system it's ready. It's like there might be something new showing up, and you really start noticing more and different and new. It's really cool practice.
Love it. Thank you. That's one for our listeners as well. And as you were talking, sorry, go on.
Yeah, no.
No, I was going to say, as you were talking, it made me think of, you know, we were talking about the womb space and also sort of being able to feel things in the body as well. You know, using that semantic knowing is can be a big part of intuition. But when you were talking about this pattern breaking and, you know, creating these new neural pathways, it made me think of the creative process, of course, which you're a massive part of. And I wondered, you know, when you're creating your art or, you know, you're engaging in your music and that sort of thing, do you find that those practices open up that, you know, that capacity, your creative capacity?
Absolutely. And I love that you mentioned that. You know how often, you know, someone is, you know, a writer goes into one place and you sit in the same place and you're trying to squeeze something out of yourself. It can be absolute nightmare. So to break that pattern, you know, you give yourself different flavors, you know, meeting different people or going into different crowds, even though, you know, we're in our, you know, spiritual tribe, right? But even breaking that pattern, I'll go to different event. You know, I love, even though, you know, I love my circles and, you know, ecstatic dance and everything else, what I would often do, you know, I'll go to a concert hall for the, you know, national you know symphony orchestra, listening different, right, different music, and then going to the jazz concert, and then, you know, keep breaking those patterns, and then it really opens us up. And I would say creativity is the result of connecting with our intuition, right? But if it's if it's the same thing happening all the time, how can we see more? How can we access more if we, you know, don't explore? It's like this journey of exploring. And the same with life, right? It's the whole metaphor for life. Everything is a metaphor for life anyway. I'd say we could squeeze a metaphor for life from anything really. But the same in life, right? If we're always the same thing and always, then how can we evolve? How can we, you know, see more or explore more? And how can we be creative? You know, what is creativity? You know, creativity, creating, which is something new, right? And diving into that, Kirsty, I'm wondering, do you have any particular like stories or examples of coming back to the divine feminine? How did the energy of the divine feminine has transformed maybe your life, or, you know, life of those who you've worked with, or, you know, your friends, or any particular stories that, you know, you intentionally have connected, or that energy particularly would have an impact?
Thank you, Kate. Yeah, no, there's so much in there about the creativity as well, and you know that sort of, as you were talking, I was thinking about that creative energy it is the divine feminine energy. It's that spiraling, ever expanding, you know, searching for new experiences. Um, yeah, where do I start with this one? Stories. Um, yeah, I mean, I guess have reconnected with how I understand the divine feminine and how I've brought that into my life very consciously in the past sort of 5 or 6 years, in the sense that I've consciously stepped onto the path of the priestess. And what do I mean by that? Well, I mean basically following the cyclical nature of our world. So, you know, living with the cycles of the moon, the cycles of nature, working with these spiraling cyclical rhythms, if you like, that we have been so sort of dislodged from over the past 2000 years. When I mean, even if you look at the clock, you know, we've got this clock with 12 hours, we've got this calendar with 12 months. Actually, there are 13 moons in our Gregorian calendar, which would suggest, and that's what we work with in the priestess pathway. We work with, instead of the 12 months, we work with the 13 moons. So That's been quite a conscious thing for me. And in that, it's allowed me, it's given me permission to step back from, I mean, I grew up in the 70s and 80s in Britain, which was probably one of the most sort of linear patriarchal system times, with even down to the architecture, which was always very, very, stark and square and rectangular and not flowy, not expressive. Um, and growing up in that sort of education system and that way of thinking where nothing, even down to creativity, I don't know whether it was the same with you, Kate. I'd love to ask you about this, but growing up, even to the subjects in school, things that celebrated the linear way of thinking, so the left brain, maths, sciences, languages to a degree, because you follow the formula, all of that was celebrated, whereas things that were a little bit more difficult to measure, to quantify, such as art, such as drama, such as music, um, they were not fated as much and almost sort of denigrated in the education system. And we were kind of, I certainly internalized this and thought, well, I have to be good at maths, and if I'm going to make a life for myself, I need to do this, 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 and go and work in an office. And that served me to a degree because it gave me the structure, it gave me a framework, but it cut off such a life force, really, that I felt. And it was something that I came to only really. I mean, I remember as a child loving to dance, loving to paint, even though I didn't consider myself very good at art, but I was always doing creative things, playing with plants and roses and you know, all the things that kids do. But then getting to a certain age and thinking, well, that's not going to get me very far in life. I need to actually channel my energies down this very linear path, although wouldn't have termed it that way. And really, really taking that on and internalizing that. And I think that was only freed up when I discovered yoga at 25. And all of a sudden, all these energies of fluidity and surrender and, moving with nature, and even down to the names of the poses, tree pose and, all the lion pose and all of this. It was all of a sudden it opened the portal to this energy that I'd forgotten about. And all of a sudden that became valuable because I could actually earn money and create a career as a yoga teacher. So that was the first step. But most recently it's been stepping back into these very, very old pre-organized religious spiritual ways of being that connect with essentially nature. And this is what the priestess path has brought back into my life. And I now work with the beautiful sacred oils as well, the anointing oils, which are essential oils that come from plants. And yeah, it's just enabled me to relax and celebrate those divine feminine energies that are within all of us and team them and welcome back in the sacred masculine within me as well. And in so doing, I've just met some amazing, amazingly beautiful, beautiful souls like yourself, and many, many other women and men who have recognized the value of that, because this is essentially the essence of Gaia, of Mother Nature, and we're learning that now, aren't we? That we've suppressed that for so long that we're at the tipping point where if we don't actually welcome that back in, we won't have anywhere to live. So yeah, I think that's, in a very, very long-winded way, that's my major kind of history with reintroducing that into my life and having met others doing the same. And it's exciting. It's an exciting time to be alive. What about you, Kate? I know you've also reconnected with the divine feminine in so many ways. So I wonder if there's something. I know we
Yeah,
both
so I
share the
would
passion.
say from the very beginning, as my defense mechanism, I would shut completely that energy down in
Mm.
order basically to survive, and um it's such a long journey, isn't it? So remembering, kind of it would get activated. We always go through our activations and then another thing, another thing, another thing. So my main and biggest activation was when I was my first pregnancy. So I was 20. So that was a really big activation back then for the feminine energy, for the divine feminine, and from being in a place of not feeling my body, not feeling anything, which was handy because all the traumas can be suppressed, all of them, but they're still there. So they're, nudging, and so that would help to access all of it, which is not an easy path, but it's always a path towards freedom, always a path towards, don't really like the word power, but you know what I'm saying? Like it's the divine power, let's say, connection with the divine. So all of those activations, and speaking of and thinking of, practical examples, I've noticed in my practice of, holding space for others, either if it's a circle, if it's a group, or one-to-one. I've noticed at the beginning, of course, it's always, through the connection and all, but I would be more in my masculine at the beginning, years before, and I'll be, trying to do things or showing up the best I can. This is that masculine, the expectations, the form, the structure, which is the more I let go and allowed, for the feminine to take over and to hold space from the feminine perspective. I've noticed that void, that container became, I'd say, more safe, more profound, more in a way that it can play out in a way I can never expect how it will. But I feel like it's always playing out kind of more beautifully, more profound, let's say. And I see the results, and I could feel nothing is forced, nothing is projected, nothing is, it's just really a flow. And holding that container from the feminine, from the divine perspective, I've noticed the container becomes, wider and safer, and kind of it's got more, I don't know if I would use a power in it, but more purity, I suppose. Purity would be a good word, and it really flows naturally. And again, this nature, right? So you can't just expect nature to play out. Okay, I want my daffodils to come out that and that day. You can never do that. Like, okay, you can expect more or less, but you allow the nature to play out. And the same in the healing process, you allow the nature of that healing to play out however is right, which is, very often is that thing, always tuning in when you provide for someone to, is it the right time to say this? Is it, how far do you go with, diving into even beliefs or whatever it is? So your intuition will guide you, which is when you really step into that divine feminine, the container holds it and you don't even have to think of it. It really plays out the way it's supposed to. Well, it always plays out the way it's supposed to be, but it's kind of more in a healing comes in a gentle yet not less powerful way. Do you know what I'm saying? It's
Yeah.
like, it's the sensation. It's very hard to put it in words. Again, that's very feminine energy for me personally,
Yeah.
is feeling rather than thoughts. And is that forever marriage between, the masculine and the feminine, feeling, and then to be able to put it into words. But I feel like the more I've let go, the more I've connected with the divine feminine, the container became more beautiful, more fluid, more kind of like mother like energy, I suppose, so I really enjoy that. And then for the person that is holding, it's also like there's no tiredness, there's no pushing anything, there's no, and it's like this fluid energy that really allowing this universal energy to hold us in it, just being the vessel, which is when kind of from the masculine, from the thoughts perception, from I want it to be in a certain, or I feel it should be that and that and that, not allowing it to flow. It's kind of, blocking it. And yes, that would be the biggest example I would have. And of course, lots of examples, in my life. And the more letting go and having that faith, I suppose intuition slash faith and hope is kind of in the same frequency, kind of, if you like to call it. The more kind of faith and hope, the more we're connected with the intuition. I don't know if you would resonate with that, Kirsty.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's you were talking about holding space, and of course in that it is so different, and I feel that too. It's the and I think about it in terms of when I first sort of set up my company, 2007. It's the only model we had as businesswomen was to do the masculine thing, which was to control and plan and and I soon realized that actually that doesn't serve anybody. It's just really stressful and really counterproductive in terms of abundance, because it's limiting and it's crushing that creativity and that individuality. And it just reminded me when you were talking about holding space, because I realized, gosh, I very quickly stepped away from that and experimented in different ways. I didn't know they were ways associated with the divine feminine at the time, but now I understand that they were. And it's more about trusting, having a little bit of a framework, of course, and planning and all of that, but trusting in the inherent support of the universe, as you were saying, that surrender to the mother energy that holds us, and the divine father energy and the divine mother energy. And yeah, and talking about sort of holding space, it's absolutely that. It's sort of you're holding space for others, but you're also being held in that holding, because you're relaxing back into something bigger than us as personalities and individuals, but you're actually connecting with that energy. And it made me think of the process of manifestation as well, which is very much linked to the divine feminine energy, isn't it? It's that link, isn't it? It's that setting the
And it's such a
intention.
paradox, isn't it? Because we think the more
Yeah.
we control, the more we organize, the more we hold it, the more we're gonna have. And it's actually quite
Yes.
opposite, especially for us women, because we manifest differently than
Yes.
men, of course. But it's amazing how it works. And the more we kind of let go and flow, then we really connect to that limitless
Mm,
energy. And so much possibilities can show up, while when we don't have space, they don't have space to show up and fill in, isn't it?
exactly. Exactly. So, my love, let's think about relationships, and how the divine feminine comes into that, and let's think about the difference between maybe nurturing in relationships and mothering, and maybe talking about that with friendships, partnerships, and how those two are different. Can you kind of talk into that and how that fits into the bigger picture with the divine
Absolutely
feminine?
love that. And when that came through first time, the difference between nurturing and mothering. And on our path, very often, if we've been overgiving, which is very common, and it comes, all including all the experiences before, people pleasing, overgiving, all connected to the same wound that we would hold. So very often we can go to the extreme, right? So now I'm not gonna give anything. Now I'm, to the, let's say, dark. It's not really dark feminine, but it's the toxic feminine, let's say. Because dark feminine, I would say it's something different, right? So the difference between nurturing, so nurturing would be somewhere in between, kind of a balance, and it's such an interesting one to really notice within ourselves, that difference, because of course we want to nurture, right? We want to love, we want to be loving, but at the same time not stepping in and being a mother for our partners, right? So for me, the main thing that would tell me in which space I am, very practically, again, love talking practicalities and life examples, is something taking away from me? Is something draining me? Or is it fulfilling me? And then again, is a very fine line between, is it fulfilling me because I have expectations, or I navigate from the wounded space, which is, let's say, I want to be loved. I wasn't seen as a child by my mother or by my father, so I'm gonna do everything so my partner sees me, right? So this is not a very healthy way. So it's again navigating from the wounded space, which is okay. We can read it as love, but it's not the unconditional one, right? There is an expectation there. So we do something in order to receive something. So when we are in a space that we feel we are fully embracing that goddess energy, the priestess energy. Okay, and we're gonna come back to it, and I'm so curious what you're gonna say about that, because you're like all about it, Kirsty. You're full on. And so for me, it's navigating from the goddess energy, from the queen energy, nurturing ourselves first, and then everything else comes after. And that's also connected to the manifestations. Very often we think that if we overgive, if we overplease, then it's going to be great. No, it works completely. And I've noticed, this is my opinion, I don't know if it works like that. I would need to do my statistics. I haven't done much yet. I will work on it. But I feel women first, they need to nurture themselves so that their cup is overflowing in order to nurture others. And for men, they have to provide first in order to be nurtured, in order to receive. I feel like it's working kind of differently. And then we can dive into that in different, and then there are layers and levels, obviously, as everything, right? But for me, is if something is draining us, if something is making us stepping into the wounds, and it's so lovely to watch that, right? It's a lovely process. I don't know, how do you feel that it's not coming through much for me right now? It's a very difficult one, isn't it? Especially if we have the tendency of mothering, and especially, let's say, with my placements, because I have lots of Libra placements, and so do you, Kirsty. So do you. So when I had my Vedic chart done, he would tell me that's the Venus energy. So it's either sexual or mothering. So people can kind of find you either one way or another, and just to really watch that. So some women might have, especially with having, Venus placements, Libra placements, have that tendency of over nurturing, or almost, over mothering. And again, I'd say, if it takes away the power from another person, so we do something for someone and we kind of have control over them because of that, I would say that's mothering, right? Because the mother, is out there, but obviously the babies, they can't do it themselves, so they need someone to navigate, which is with an adult person, you don't need that. So taking the freedom away from someone. What else would you add, Kirsty? It's such an open one. I don't even have a fixed answer yet. I suppose I'm still exploring that.
Yeah, I think we need to write a 3,000 word essay and submit it, actually. I think you've just explained it beautifully. I mean, it's so nuanced, isn't it? And it's so, um, as you say, it's very much to do with the interplay of relationships. And to me, it's this equal flow of energy coming from one partner to another. And I feel you've touched upon it absolutely beautifully. I feel that when you're in complete sovereignty and completely able to love yourself, then you can fully give without fear of overgiving, because you're not trying to fulfill wound or this trauma, um and you can then receive with gratitude, and it becomes this flowing cycle. But who's perfect? None of us are perfect. And this is, I challenge any one of our listeners to write in and say, well, actually, yes, I'm there, and my relationships are completely balanced and flowing, because we're all a work in progress. But I think it goes to, you touched on it so beautifully. Also, it's being willing to dig into the shadows and do the work, do the shadow work, so that A, you're aware of where those woundings are, and B, that you can bring those woundings up, those shadows, to be loved, so that they can be alchemized and hold within you and healed, So, but yeah, it's that awareness also, isn't it, of the power dynamics, so that you're not, you're not giving someone something, your time, your attention, your energy, because you want theirs back. You're just giving them that because you're giving them that from an unconditionally heart open, loving space. And that to me is the mother energy in its purest form. I mean, what mother does not give to their baby because they just unconditionally, they don't expect anything back, they just want to give. So it's so nuanced, but I think it very much depends on everybody standing in their sovereignty and everybody giving themselves self-love. I was doing a workshop actually yesterday, working with the female archangels, and we were working with Charity, Archaea Charity, and of course her message, one of her messages is to fill yourself with love, because then from that space you're able to unconditionally love everybody else, every other being. And that's exactly it, isn't it? To fill that cup, so that you're not giving from a depleted space, so, and not disempowering the other person in the relationship, the other beings.
I feel it's also intertwined with the victim and the perpetrator
Yeah.
dynamics as well. Very often thinking that victim is a victim, very often the victim is in control. So it's a very interesting one too. It's intertwining many layers and many levels of other topics, because we always come back to the mother and the father, isn't it? In any work, really. And for me, okay, mother and the father, that also intertwines, the divine feminine, the divine masculine, the universal, the earth, the duality. It's always coming back to the same thing, and it's intertwining many, many topics, isn't it? And then coming back again to the divine feminine and its contribution to the personal healing and collective healing of communities. Kirsty, how does reconnecting, how does embracing it and tuning in and exploring it contributes to that?
Well, I think in my understanding, I think we probably touched on this in the last episode in part one, so forgive me everybody if I'm repeating myself. But yeah, I think for me it comes back to the that hermetic principle of as within so without, and that we were talking about having the divine masculine and divine feminine energies within all of us, irrespective of our gender, our physical gender. And it's when those are in balance that we can then vibrate that outwards to the external. And that's when we start to vibrationally impact the harmony and balance externally. And then we only have to look at the state of, the crisis that is the geological crisis, the environmental crisis that we're in. And that's a pure example of imbalance of energies, where the natural divine feminine energies of earth have been suppressed and you know, over farmed, overwrought, and destroyed, and yes, these energies are coming back into balance, and we're recognizing now that we are to work with these in a respectful and mutually respectful relationship rather than one of taking. So yeah, for me it's those two things. Kate, would you like to add? I'm sure you've got
But
loads.
same as I spoke before, it's a different type of healing. It's not
Mm.
doing, it's being. And I think the more we are beings and the being and the feelings, we're tapping in deeper. And that includes, I suppose, the shadow work and everything else what's underneath. And of course we can't just say, okay, now we're in a era, now we're in a phase of the divine feminine and nothing else exists. No, but it's, I suppose, the contraband, the finding the balance from years of patriarchy, years of navigating through the masculine, years of that imbalance. We often need to touch the other extreme to find the balance. But with the personal healing and collective healing, it's a different type of healing, I'd say. Like I've mentioned before, it's we would go through years of healing, through years of releasing, years of shadow work, trauma work, how much more there is, right? And it's like always doing and doing and more, which is, for me personally, the more we're in that kind of feminine, and it is that mothering, nurturing energy. And I love that you've mentioned the archangels, and especially the female archangels, the archaias, because that's the main and the first teaching, isn't it? And you're teaching now as well, Kirsty. I'm delighted, and you're sharing their beauty and the wisdom. Any course that I would start before, the first teaching is you're already healed, and it's you're already healed. Okay, we have our struggles, we have our journey, but we are already healed. And I would say is that mothering love that looks at you and like you're already perfect, and how much more, how different can you describe it then? Who looks at you like that? A loving, nurturing mother, right? Who else can see you like this, that you're already perfect, you're already healed, other than the divine feminine. So it contributes to the community, to the collective healing, to personal healing, adding that level of letting go. Okay, we still follow our process. We still, that doesn't mean, again, that we're just gonna stop and just absolutely love when I say something and people go to the other extreme. Okay, so now we're doing nothing, right? No, quite the contrary. Now we're actually doing by not doing, right? Um, Kirsty, because we're going around, and for me, nature and the elements, 13 months, you've already mentioned. I want to know more of your beautiful knowledge and wisdom and your experience with that, because you've mentioned the 13 months before. How the elements of nature, fire, water, earth, air, intertwines with that, with the divine feminine, the wheel of the year, and it's also the path of the, priestess path. Could you talk more about that? How is that intertwining? How is that connected to this?
Yeah, I think I just wanted to pick up on what you said before as well, and said, yeah, absolutely, we are all perfect in it wherever we are. We're not in need of healing because we are. But yeah, it's just so interesting. Where do I start with this? I think for me, it's dipping back into the rhythms of nature and us understanding ourselves as being nature and not separate from nature and not divorced from nature, and that's it basically, without going into any more depth. again, I feel that we've been conditioned for so many years, and this has been the toxic expression of the patriarchy. And we want to make it clear that we're not blaming gender or man. We're talking about energies and um, societal structures and cultural structures, Um, but if we look back, pre-organized religion, pre sort of 2,500 years ago, we find, and we still have many people now who are not in sort of first world countries living with these cycles of nature, living in smaller communities that are actually living in a beautifully mutually supportive way with nature, where they live in such an abundant way. They have an abundance of fresh air, of fresh food, of beautifully supportive relationships, familial relationships, community relationships, and the key, I feel, is that they are living in sync with Gaia, with Lady Mother Earth, and not, it's in balance. And to me, that's what the priestess path is, or the priest path. In fact, it's anything that's um spiritually living in tune with nature. And when we, again, it's that it's that place of sitting, listening, and understanding who we are, and understanding that we are in essence a part of that whole picture. We're not separate from nature. We're not here to control it or to use it, but we're actually a part of that tapestry. And to me, that is essentially what the priestess path is, or any sort of um spirituality that celebrates that and that flow, really. And we can go down all sorts of little rabbit holes about different practices that encompasses, such as cyclical living, or working with oils, or working with crystals, or working with ceremonies to celebrate the passage of you mentioned the wheel of the year. In the wheel of the year, we have the Celtic wheel of the year I'm talking about here. We have 8 festivals throughout the year. And these are very much dictated by the passage of the sun and the moon around the earth. So we have this 2 solstices, the summer solstice, the winter solstice. We have the equinoxes, which are the autumn and the spring. And then we have what we call the cross quarter celebrations, which fall literally between those, which are the 1st of February in bulk. We have the 1st of August, Lammas. We have then Samhain, which is 31st of October, which is now known as Halloween. And we have the 1st of May, which is Beltane. And all of these are celebrated because they mark a particular progression in nature. And whether you're in the northern hemisphere or the southern hemisphere, they kind of switch. So, the summer solstice in the northern hemisphere, for example, will be the winter solstice in the southern. But whatever, irrespective of that, it's that marking the cyclical nature of the seasons, and of us as natural beings. And I absolutely love the fact that you get to celebrate 8 times a year as opposed to 3 or 4 as well. I think that's brilliant. But it's those sort of practices that link you into an awareness of nature, and noticing that maybe on the 1st of February in the UK you see snowdrops, maybe at Belton on the 1st of May you look for hawthorn flowers, that sort of thing. And it pulls you into an understanding of yourself as part of nature, as opposed to divorced from it. I don't know whether that answers your question, love.
I love
What would you
seriously
like to add?
divorce from nature is such a good one. Never heard it before. I absolutely love it. Yeah, and it shows us how the wheel of the year is different to the festivals that were artificially added. Let's say we have 1st of January, which is middle of winter, everything is asleep, and we have artificially added, this extra motivation, year's resolution, which is not really the best time to do it, right? And and then again we have inbox, so everything is you know coming to it's the real spring, it's everything is awakening. And for me, wheel of the year and following those celebrations, do you really kind of connect us as nature and sight? And do you really, when I found out about it and I started actually following the festivals, and let's say having someone preparing for winter, preparing for darker days, that veil that is thin between darkness and light, and it really made sense. Tuning into the wheel of the year always felt natural, and letting go to that process that happens within us, of the rebirth, a constant rebirth, either if it's outside or inside, as you've mentioned before, us within. um and everything is so intertwined and connected, and connecting with natural cycles just for me personally feels right. And it works. It really works, if you do your manifestations, planting seeds and winter solstice, doing the wishes, and then just plant the seeds, you don't think of it, then you do different rituals, different things, and it really works. And since I started doing it a few years ago, it really works much better than artificially placed and weird stuff that we're being told, and distracted by, as I see it as a distraction to the natural cycles. um yeah, I don't know if would like to add something to it.
Yeah, I love that about, you talking about working with, the cycles of nature and going back to sort of the pre-industrial societies. These were the fundamentals of agricultural societies, that understood the potency of working with nature as opposed to against it or completely out of sync with it. And even down to the lunar phases, when we've got sort of the new moon, the dark moon, it's a time of reflection and quiet. Often our physical energies can be quite low. We can feel a bit tired. As we're moving up towards the sort of the half moon, it's a great time to focus on what we want to bring into our lives, talking about manifestation, and then the full moon is a great time to release what's come into its rightness, its fullness, and is ready to be let go. So it works on so many different levels. And as you say, once you start to dive in, makes absolute sense. And it's like, why have we not been doing this? And it's exciting because so many people now are tuning back into that and understanding it at such a physical and spiritual and emotional level. So, and practical too. So thank you, my lovely. So let's go back to our favourite, everybody's favourite theme, which is shadow work. I know we've talked about shadow work in many, many different ways, but thinking about sort of the role that shadow work plays in embracing the divine feminine, Kate, would you have any advice on how our listeners could incorporate that into the whole landscape, or maybe some little sort of nuggets of your experience?
Where do I even begin with shadow work and my experience, girl?
Oh.
Where do we? I think maybe we do the whole episode on shadow work, right?
I think so, yes.
I do think so. So just to
Mm.
touch upon it, when we work, let's say diving into the work with archangels, and I'm really curious what your view on that. Very often we would see many things of the world as something outside of us. Okay. And that was one of my biggest maybe realizations, or really connecting with that whatever we connect with, it's us. And it's all coming back to good old we are one. Okay, we all know we are one, but do we actually know? So and then people would often say, oh, I don't work with angels, or I don't, no, I just connect with the source, and yada yada. And there are these different deities, different gods, goddesses that you can work with, archangels, archaea, whatever it is, it's always us. Whatever manifests, Mary Magdalene, priestesses, and we're going to come back to it in a second, it's us. Everything is us. Okay. And the same with the good old shadow work. That's again my view. So okay, this is like a very, very high perspective looking at it, and just remembering that. So not allowing ourselves to be whatever, because we are in this density, so we play around in this density, right? But first of all, acknowledging that whatever happens and whatever manifests in our lives, it is the mirror reflection of what's inside, and it is to serve us and to serve the highest good. And then again, we have the thing of the choice. Do we have a choice or do we not? This is an interesting one. And then on one hand, we could say, no, we don't, because everything is orchestrated. But then thinking of, if I have a sparkle of God within me and I am God, source, however you like to call it, so I have orchestrated, right? And the God experiencing itself here. We can go on, I can go on for hours of that, right? But to come back to the essence and like the main core, and connecting that shadow work with the divine feminine and how it all plays out, basically just following the process, and I suppose remembering that. And then again, everything, the whole experience, I always tell myself that whole experience here is just really, really just a blink of an eye and a lifespan of a soul, isn't it? And there is really, really only freedom. There's only more freedom. There's only more consciousness, if you like. There's only more exploring. There's only more always out there for us. Even though the experience might feel hard, or even though the experience might not feel right. My friend said a very nice thing, that she said something about, she would do yoga. She's going to be actually a guest in our podcast, so maybe I won't spoil too much, but she mentioned something like that, about opening the throat chakra, right? She said, you need to say it right there and in that moment. And it doesn't matter if what you say is right, or if you would put it in different words later on. It needs to be done there and in that moment, because you feel like it. Okay. And it's the same kind of with the shadow work. You just go right through it. There's no judgment. If something comes, it's meant to be, and it's meant to be experienced, right? We can't be overthinking, and we can't be judging ourselves, because we won't get anywhere, right? And I see the shadow work like that. Whatever comes is right, whatever shows up is right. And to have that trust, to have that faith that everything works out for the highest good of ourselves, for the highest good of the humanity, regardless if the thoughts and beliefs might be completely different, it does eventually. That's how I operate. Okay, I don't know if you're gonna agree with Kirsty or whoever is listening, but it really is. And very often with the shadow work, people get to some stage and it's so sugar coated. Okay, it's so, I don't know, it's so not the way it actually is. I like to keep things real,
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time having faith and hope. I don't know how you see that. And again, shadow work is a really big one. We could talk for an hour about that, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I think, yeah, weeks. Yeah, so many beautiful points, Kate, and I agree with you on all of them. And it's, to me, it's very simple. It is very simple. It's we are the light and we are the dark, and we have each quality that we have has a light side and a dark side. And there's no judgment on that. So light necessarily isn't good, dark isn't necessarily bad. They're just two sides of the same coin. And I think the issue has been within our society that we've not been taught how to have an awareness of the shadows within us. So whether that be something as deep rooted as deep trauma, or just sides of our personality, the tendency is to only look at the shiny things, And you touched about it with the angels, we've all been there. Oh, we want to be in the light and we want to be playing with the angels. Well, when we actually get to work with the angels, we understand that, they embrace all of that, because it's the yin, it's the yang, it's the two polarities that actually bring everything into wholeness. And it's when we don't have an awareness, or we refuse to look at those shadows, that they start to pop up in ways that are perhaps not healthy and good for us or for anyone else. So when we can actually have an awareness of them, and this for me is what is the beauty in shadow work, and especially in the sort of working in the 30 Moon Mystery School, and with the in the priestess presence lineage, we work with the archetypes of the divine feminine, and each one of those archetypes is assigned to one of the 13 moons. And when working with the archetypes, we embrace the light qualities, we recognize those in ourselves, we amplify those, we celebrate them, and we also recognize the shadow qualities, and we welcome those in, and we bring them into wholeness. And that can be activating, that can be difficult and challenging and bring initiations, but I know that they're less so than if we don't, because it's when we ignore them that the big issues come around. So to me, shadow work is an essential part of being human, being humanly divine. As you say, we're in a physical body, we're spirit, we're divine, we're God's source, we're angelic, but we're living in human physical bodies. So it's welcoming those two. And I also think it's I just wanted to touch on this briefly, as you were talking about the shadows and things. The way in the West we really brush aside talking about death, and to a degree that it's almost taboo. It's almost the last taboo. Yet when we understand death as just a part again of those natural cycles, as you say, we have a death and rebirth within ourselves, sometimes several times a day, so when we see physical death as a part of that cyclical nature of the essence of source energy, then that's when we can have a healthy understanding, and we take away the fear, and we can actually just accept it. It's acceptance, isn't it? So yeah, shadow work. Yeah, I think we do need an episode on shadow.
Yeah, I agree. We should have the whole episode on that. And you've touched already, the inner priestess energy. Kirsty, please share with us a bit more about your journey, because you're a wonderful priestess. And could I call it priestess school? No, it's not a school, right? How would you call it?
I am a part of a mystery school, yeah.
Oh, it is a school. Okay.
Yeah, it is a
So
mystery
how can,
school.
okay, for those that
Um,
have no idea, all this about the whole concept, being a priestess, how can someone begin to awaken or explore their inner priestess's energy? And are there any particular rituals? You've mentioned already a few things, but maybe to combine it now, and a whole any practices associated with that, and to incorporate in the spiritual journey. Can you please share, and about your school, everything, can you share with us more about that, because this is such a big one. I think we could have a whole episode on that as well, but if you could, to conclude our whole conversation.
oh, well, thank you. I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I've spent quite a few years in the priestess closet. And you know, for good reason. I think it's been a word that has been denigrated. Um, as humans, we've been tortured, killed, um, and um, victimized historically for having a relationship with the divine feminine, which is what I see as being part of the priestess path or the priest path, or you know, being part of that sort of that's heritage really. But it's so I think that's the first thing I'd like to say, and it's only recently that I've been actually quite comfortable to say, actually, yes, I claim that. I am that, and I have I take full responsibility in claiming that name, and I have no shame around it. And in fact, I I I'm proud of the fact that I've been able to step into that as part of the essence of who I am. Because without that, it was not, I was not in, I was in denial, really. Certainly externally, and that's not helpful for for anyone. Um, and it was something that I wanted to be able to pass on to my daughter, not particularly that path, or but the fact that I was actually able to step into the truth of who I was. Um, so I think that's what I wanted to say firstly. So I'm very grateful to have been able to have done that work and been supported to do that by the beautiful women that and men that I work with. So yeah, the particular mystery school that I belong to is it's the Priestess Presence Temple, and there are two pathways. There's the pathway of the 13 Moon mystery school, which is where you work with these archetypes of the divine feminine in this cyclical nature. Um, and you work in ceremony and in self-study with these archetypal energies of the divine feminine, and work internally with yourself, and it's an alchemy of the soul, really. It's as we say, celebrating these light qualities, but then also unearthing these shadow qualities, and really alchemizing them so that they're a part of who we are. And that's done through many ways. Um, and then there's the Rosa Mystica school as well, which is again part of the Priestess Presence. Elaine Doherty is the dean of the Priestess Presence, and she works with a lady called Diana Dubrow in the Rosa Mystica school, which is a school. And a lady called Jack Shenton, who's also been on the podcast, and this is where we follow the teachings of Mary Magdalene. Um, so we're basically celebrating that Christed energy, but also working with the divine feminine with that Christed energy. So we're working with the energies of Jeshua and Mary Magdalene. So you've got the sacred feminine and the divine masculine together, and then we work with the sacred holy oils. So these are beautiful, beautiful blends of essential oils that Diana Dubrow actually was given in a lucid dream 40 years ago. And she's brought these through, and they're just so exquisite. And we self-anoint, and we learn how to anoint other beings. And it's the easiest way to describe it is as being a kiss of spirit on the body through the oils. And I know you've experienced it too, Kate, and you know that the beauty of it. But it's using the oils to release any sort of stuck energy, any bits of any parts of you that need love and need light and need to be brought into your awareness. And often it can release physical stuck energy and help to resolve traumas as well. And it's and both of these curriculums are cyclical, so you go through them year after year and deepen into the knowledge and work with, you know, other beings as well in groups, in person and online. And it's just beautiful. It's an ongoing mystery and unveiling of all this beautiful wisdom. So yeah.
Probably we're gonna have another episode just on that, so we can explore more, and you could share more of your, you know, experience and knowledge and wisdom regarding that, you know, because the oil is there. Oh, it's such a goodie. It's such a goodie. Yeah, so I think we have concluded everything for today. I think we're gonna follow that thread in the future, especially as we've mentioned with the shadow work, and I feel like we've opened other portals today for other discussions, and I would love to hear our listeners as well to share their experience, you know, regarding everything that we've touched upon, because we grow together. And I'm really, really curious about other people's experiences, right?
Absolutely. And yeah,
Yeah,
we'd
yeah.
love to invite you
Especially if you disagree, I'm in for it, because that's for me very interesting one. I
this
absolutely
is how we
love.
grow and learn,
Yeah,
isn't
that's how we grow. Absolutely love that.
it?
So thank you so much for today, Kirsty. Looking forward to our very next one, and
Thank you so
keep
much.
shining, girl.
And you too, and thank you to all our listeners, and please, we're going to be bold and ask you also today that if you've enjoyed the episode and if you're enjoying the podcast, please subscribe to the YouTube channel, because it helps us to become visible and spread the joy, the angels and the magic a little bit further, because that's what we're all about. So if you do subscribe, if you like it, please subscribe. And thank you so much. Thank you, Kate.
Thank
Have a
you,
beautiful rest of
Kirsty.
your day. We'll see you
Yeah.
soon.
Bye.
Bye.